What if the single biggest reason you have never finished your biggest goals is not laziness, not lack of talent, and not bad timing? What if the real reason is something you do every single day, something that actually feels productive, something that feels like progress, but is silently draining the very fuel your brain needs to follow through? Because here is what almost nobody talks about. There is a hidden psychological trap that catches smart, motivated, driven people. And the more excited you are about your goals, the deeper this trap pulls you in. You are about to find out exactly what it is. And once you understand it, you will never look at your own behavior the same way again. Let us start with something you have probably experienced firsthand. Think about the last time you had a big idea. Maybe it was a business you wanted to start, a habit you were committed to building, a skill you were finally going to learn. Remember how alive that felt. Remember how real it seemed. Now tell me, did you share that plan with someone? A friend, a family member, someone online? And did you notice, maybe a few days later, that the excitement had quietly faded? That the urgency somehow disappeared, even though nothing had actually happened yet? That feeling is not a coincidence. That is your brain working exactly as it was designed to, but completely against you. In 1982, a German psychologist named Peter Gallwitzer began studying a phenomenon that would take decades to fully understand. He called it symbolic self-completion. What he discovered was both simple and deeply unsettling. When a person publicly declares a goal, when they tell others what they intend to do, the brain registers that social acknowledgement as a form of progress. Not real progress, not actual work, but a symbolic version of it. And for the brain, the feeling of progress is what matters most. It does not always know the difference between doing something and being recognized for planning to do something. In a landmark study published in the journal Psychological Science in 2009, Gallwitzer and his colleagues ran a series of experiments involving 163 participants. They were all working toward personal goals, things they genuinely wanted to achieve. Some participants told others about their intentions. Others kept their goals completely private. Then they were given time to work. The results were striking. The people who had shared their goals consistently stopped working sooner. They felt they had already made more progress than they actually had. And when asked how close they felt to their goal, they reported feeling significantly closer, even though their actions told a completely different story. The act of announcing the goal had created what the researchers called a premature sense of completion. The brain had already moved on. It had already collected its reward, and now it saw less reason to push. Think about that for a moment. Your brain cannot always tell the difference between talking about becoming something and actually becoming it. When someone smiles and says, "That is such a great idea," or "I know you can do it," a small release of dopamine happens. Dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. It is the same signal the brain sends when you actually complete something meaningful. The same chemical, the same sensation, just for a fraction of the cost. And once that reward has been collected, motivation drops, because motivation exists to move you toward a goal. Once your brain believes the goal has already been partially reached, the motivation engine slows down. It is not a character flaw. It is neuroscience. Dr. Derek Sivers, an entrepreneur and author, spoke about this very phenomenon in one of the most watched TED Talks on psychology. He argued that sharing your goals gives you a social reality. Other people now acknowledge your identity as someone pursuing this goal, and that social reality satisfies the same need that actually achieving the goal would satisfy. The hunger goes away before you have eaten a single meal. Now, here is where it gets even more interesting. There is another layer to this that most people never hear about. It is called identity-based goal disruption. Researchers at New York University found that people who strongly identify with a goal, meaning they see the goal as part of who they are actually more vulnerable to this trap, not less. Why? Because when you say, "I am going to become a writer," or "I am building a company," Or, I am training for a marathon. You are not just describing a plan. You are claiming an identity. And the moment other people reflect that identity back to you, the moment they treat you like a writer, an entrepreneur, an athlete, your brain starts to believe you already are that thing. Before you have done the work, before you have earned the title, the praise activates what psychologists call identity satisfaction. And identity satisfaction, just like dopamine, reduces urgency. It removes the psychological gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that gap, that productive discomfort, is exactly what drives people to act. Remove the discomfort, and you remove the drive. This pattern shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. It shows up in the person who talks endlessly about the book they are going to write but never opens a document. It shows up in the entrepreneur who pitches their idea to everyone they meet but never launches. It shows up in the person who posts on social media about their new health journey every single week but looks exactly the same a year later. They are not lazy. They are not failures. They are caught in a psychological loop that feels like progress but produces nothing. Every announcement, every nod of encouragement, every supportive comment is quietly replacing the action that should have been taken. And the cruelest part, it feels good. It feels like momentum. It feels like community and accountability and support. But underneath that feeling, the work is not getting done. Psychologist Gabriel Oettingen spent over 20 years studying the science of positive thinking and goal achievement at New York University and the University of Hamburg. Her research challenged one of the most popular ideas in self-help culture, the idea that visualizing success and talking about your dreams helps you achieve them. What she found was the opposite. In study after study, people who spent time mentally indulging in the fantasy of their achieved goal, imagining the applause, picturing the finished product, telling people about the future version of themselves, consistently showed lower energy, less effort, and poorer outcomes than people who did not. She called this mental contrasting. When you only imagine the positive outcome without connecting it to the real work required, your brain begins to treat the fantasy as a substitute for reality. The energy that should go into taking action gets redirected into the pleasure of the fantasy itself. Her book, Rethinking Positive Thinking, published in 2014, laid out decades of evidence showing that the path to achievement is not paved with public celebration. It is paved with quiet, focused, often uncomfortable effort, work done in private, before anyone is watching, before anyone is impressed. Now let us be honest about what this does not mean. This does not mean you should hide in isolation and never speak to anyone. Accountability, done correctly, can be a powerful tool. The research makes a very specific distinction. The problem is not sharing your goals with everyone. The problem is sharing the identity and the outcome, the image of who you will be and what you will have before you have done the work. There is a difference between saying, I am going to be a successful entrepreneur, and saying, I commit to working on this for 1 hour every evening for the next 30 days and I want you to check on me. The first statement satisfies your identity. The second creates structured obligation. The first feels like an arrival. The second keeps the gap open. The first collects a reward before the work. The second delays the reward until the work is done. Research by psychologists at the University of Toronto supports this. Specific behavioral commitments, concrete, time-bound, action-focused statements, do not trigger the same premature satisfaction effect. They keep the brain engaged because they do not satisfy identity. They only create pressure around process. There is a concept in ancient philosophy that speaks to this directly, long before the language of psychology existed to explain it. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, which was never intended for publication, never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. He chose to process his deepest commitments in private, not in public. The Meditations, perhaps the most famous journal in history, was a private record of a man holding himself accountable to no one but himself. He did not announce his virtues. He practiced them alone in writing with no audience. This is not an accident of history. It is a strategy. It is what serious practitioners across centuries and cultures have understood intuitively. The work that matters most is almost always done in the quiet, before the world has anything to say about it. So what does this actually look like in practice? It looks like choosing one clear goal and writing it down somewhere private, a journal, a notes app, a document that no one else will see. Not a social media post, not a story update, not a group chat announcement, just a private written commitment between you and yourself. It looks like breaking that goal into the smallest possible unit of daily action. Not I will write a book, but I will write 200 words every morning before I check my phone. Not I will get fit, but I will do 15 minutes of movement before I sit down for work. The smaller the unit, the harder it is for the mind to escape into fantasy. It forces you into process, and process is where goals actually live. It looks like measuring your progress privately, tracking it in a way that only you can see, building your own internal evidence that you are moving. Because here is something important. The satisfaction of private progress is real. It is earned. It does not evaporate the way public praise does. When you quietly cross a day off a streak, when you finish a chapter no one knew you were writing, when you complete a workout you never posted about, that feeling belongs to you completely. No one can take it. No one gave it to you. You built it, and that kind of satisfaction compounds. It builds self-trust. It builds the evidence that you are someone who finishes things quietly on your own terms. The moment you stop needing permission to begin and stop needing applause to continue is the moment everything changes. Because here is the truth about every person you have ever admired for what they built. They did not get applause first. They did not wait for validation. They worked in obscurity. They showed up when no one was watching. They made mistakes no one will ever know about. They fixed them. They kept going. And by the time the world noticed, they were already far enough along that no amount of praise could derail them. The praise came after the roots were deep, after the foundation was set, after the work was already done. That is the natural sequence. Not announce, then work. Work first. Then let what you have built speak for itself. Because what you have built does not need your words to defend it. It stands on its own. And when it does, the recognition that comes is a reflection of reality, not a substitute for it. There is one final thing worth sitting with before you move forward from this. Every time you feel the urge to tell someone about a new plan before you have taken even a single real step, that urge is worth examining. Ask yourself honestly, am I sharing this because it will genuinely help me move forward? Or am I sharing it because I want to feel the way finishing would feel without actually finishing? That question alone, asked sincerely, will save you more time and energy than almost anything else. Keep the goal inside. Keep the plan private. Let the gap between where you are and where you want to be stay open and uncomfortable for a while. Sit in that discomfort. Let it push you. Let it be the fuel. Because that gap, that quiet pressure between who you are today and who you are working to become, is not a problem to be relieved by other people's words. It is the engine, and you do not want to turn it off before the journey even begins. Do the work first. Let the results speak when they are ready. And when they do, and they will, no announcement will be necessary. If this spoke to something real in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every week, more content like this, rooted in real psychology, built for people who want to understand how the mind actually works. Take care of yourself.